Welcome to episode 101 of the show. This show being Beyond the Ballot. This is the first episode rebranded as Beyond the Ballot. I'm so glad you all came to listen. Today I'm talking with a friend, Mr. Anarchist. Mr. Anarchist has some great ideas for starting intentional communities, how to fund them, how to get people that you know and trust together. And we go over his ideas and some ideas in general about intentional communities. I hope you enjoy the show. Before we jump into it, please consider checking out my Patreon, patreon.com/beyondtheballot. If you like what I do, I'd appreciate your support. Speaking of support, a huge thank you to the Beyond the Ballot super supporters, Maxwell, Dave, and Dennis at that super supporter level on Patreon. I appreciate it. The show is in all the same places it used to be, except it's at Beyond Ballot Pod on places like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff. And we have a new website, gobeyondtheballot.com. Check it out and enjoy the show. All right, man, I'm here with you, Mr. Anarchist, and this is the first episode of Beyond the Ballot, so episode 101 of all podcasts in total. I'm stoked to have you back on because you were on the Dank Pod Stash.
It was a great experience. I am very honored and pleased to be here with you now. Congratulations on the new format, and I'm sure everything's going to go really well.
I'm hoping so. It's going smooth thus far.
Talk to me, brother. What do you got on your plate?
Well, you inspired this. You inspired this one because you've been pushing real hard on different social medias for the intentional community stuff, like looking into starting one. And the thing that caught my eye was you wanted to talk about, or you have been talking about, starting them, but with less of a commune feel, right?
Oh, yeah. I would like it to be as much acreage as possible. I think is a good idea. I'd worry about if it becomes too populated later, but the form of what it would take, I think at the very earliest of days, would probably necessitate some form of a club, a fraternal organization, some sort of group that you can identify. Here's what the parameters are of being a member of the group, whatever you want. You can create a secret handshake or something. Point being, and this will be a theme that goes throughout, is since we are all compelled to one level or another to play the rules that we didn't get a say in writing, some rules, some places are better than others. We look to find those places and exploit weaknesses in their system. Like, my vocation for a long time was being in the casino industry, and a lot of people have their system for coming in and going, here's your little holes in the system that if things go the right way, I can totally do really well exploiting those gaps. So I look for those opportunities and have done a good amount of reading since the housing bubble on how would you end up making this happen. And I realize it's going to take a lot more than me, which is a very difficult thing for a lot of individualist, libertarian, anarchist, voluntarists to do, because I think, especially speaking for myself, I'm much more like the idea of being a chief than an Indian, of being the chef and not the sous chef, of being the man in charge, the quarterback, the team leader. And I think that's really pretty endemic in a lot of the people that are from this strain of anarchism, where it's almost taboo to insinuate that we might all work together as a community.
Right.
Look, that sounds way too close to commune, and I ain't doing no commie shit. It's like, you always have to share it in the right terms with your audience. And I find, like, when you're talking to people that come from our strain of anarchism, libertarianism, you have to use terms like it would be a free market society, that there wouldn't be a welfare state, that we would rely on the charity of our neighbors. Choose to engage in that charity if you want, but your social capital, if you're a capitalist and you're living in a community of 100, 200, maybe 5, if I had my way, I'd like to see a 500 population of adult settlement on something like 2,000 acres. You can look for yourself, and you can see what's a better way to behave, and it comes back on you way quicker living in a small town. I lived in a
It
really
does.
big town, and now I live in a smaller town. And you get a bad reputation, you get known, your picture gets out. And in a town of some maybe starting out 40 or less people, yeah, you're not going to want to be the guy that is an asshole in one way or another. And, people will decide what their level of ability of charity is. But I think uh, going back, that the most important thing is getting that kind of a fraternal organization, a club together, at least so you could maybe form like a committee of the people who have the time, have the knowledge, the ability, the desire to get together and hammer out all these points. Like, I have a fairly long list of different concerns of how do you deal with trash, how do you deal with septic, how do you deal with water, subdivision of land, and the list goes on and
Well,
on and
there's
on and on.
and
And I
there's
realize I'm not going to be the guy who's going to make all those answers.
right, yeah, and there's a ton of different
So I need more
questions
people.
and a ton of different elements to this. So let's reel back before we look at like the big scope of it, and address some of the like the
Uh-huh.
little things. So when I was looking into intentional communities, after I contacted you yesterday, after you fired me up about this, everything I could find is
Uh-huh.
really commune leaning. And the people
Yeah.
it seems to
Oh
tend
yeah.
to lean more left as far as the political and social organization of the people there. Um, and it makes
Yeah.
sense because of the way
And
that everything in the US is going right now, and there's a lot of people who prefer that and want to
mhm.
get out of wherever they are and away from what they fear as the right taking over, I guess. And so what separation specifically are we looking at from a commune style? Like what do you see that creates a commune style community versus what you want to do?
A commune style community with the whole of the land would probably be owned by one entity or one trust. I don't know all the terms. Again, I'm still the ignorant guy in this. I have a lot of just ideas, but I'll be looking to make more contact with people who are professionals in law and all the rest that would be able to take me from A to Z. But looking at seeing there are benefits to living a communal life. And I know that probably disturbs a lot of right wing people. But if it were the type of place where you can voluntarily choose to engage in this thing that's kind of socialist, but you can also not do it,
Mm-hmm.
and you can trust in the fact that your community is not a bunch of red flag waving property doesn't mean shit people, that you can pick and choose as you want. And instead of it being the whole of the property is owned by one entity or all of us, that you subdivide the land and that there will be individual contracts over individual parcels of land. So, whereas my idea of 1,000 or so acres, if it was a commune, it would all be pretty much just one title and they wouldn't really seek subdivision.
So
I would
within
think they might, but I
with
think that's the big difference with
yeah,
individual properties.
within the subdivision and the contracts and whatnot, are you thinking that it would have to be, state recognized subdivisions and contracts, or just recognized within the community? Because looking up the everything I looked up,
Both.
and there's three main things that seem to have the most promise to me, and as far as getting that piece of land and getting out from under, let's say, taxes and things like that, and other mandates.
Uh huh.
So it looks like social club, which you mentioned, is it's a good one. I think better for the structure of the people who are there rather than the legal structures. I think the next best one is a nonprofit of some sort, which social club falls under, and so does the last one. But the one that seems to be the most advantageous would be building a religious nonprofit. And I'll include articles.
Which is difficult from what I understand. But I I think we may know some people that have actually founded some legitimate churches, and maybe we could approach one of them to get it going. But again, anytime a project like that has religion attached to it, it's going to be an extra thing that not only the state, but the state apologists who would have you be overrun by the enforcers would be able to point at and not call you a religion, call you a cult.
Mm-hmm.
So I would stray away from it unless possible. But when you were saying of like, which way would you want to go, more kind of underground, like do whatever the hell you want, or seek all of the proper legal avenues, I'd say both.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, once you would get to a point, from where I'm coming from, and I may change, is first thing getting together like a fraternal organization, and these would be the people who would be most likely to become the entrepreneurial settlers, people with at least a fair amount of money, so that when they get established, it'll make it a lot easier for somebody of lower skills to be able to move into the community because it'll already be going.
Mm-hmm.
Dang, I forgot where I was exactly headed with the investors. Yeah, the investors, that would have to come after the fraternal organization or the club. And again, you'd have to go through what would probably be the most advantageous to your group. And some things might be better on the entire piece of land. Some things might be better, oh no, subdivide it according to the law and it works better this way. Or you could put it in a living trust, or any number of means of basically protecting yourself. And I don't know the best legal course to protect a project like this. So I'm going to be forming out of this club or fraternal organization a committee of sorts,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to address all of the concerns necessary and to find the best way for especially all of the funds and activities that is being engaged in pursuit of this goal to be absolutely transparent, maybe even something on the blockchain. I don't know, but for anybody who would then want to become one of the investors, I wouldn't demand that the investors be a member of the club or organization. But if you were an investor, you would probably be able to have a better opportunity to buy one of the parcels of land. You'd probably get it at the price that the investors bought it at, not the small markup, which I'm anticipating. If you can offer a group of investors a 20% advance or return on investment, 20%, $1.5 million, you could turn it into $1.8 million. You can find 1,000 or more acres for around $1 million. If you can go, okay, let's go 1.5 million to 1.8. That was my math.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. The $1.5 million worth of investors for $1.5 million, you can get a really large chunk of land. And because of buying in bulk, just like anything, you're making the cost per little unit a lot less. So if you were trying to go with a group of people and start a 40-acre farm, cost per acre is probably going to be a lot higher than it is for that 1,000-acre tract. And I believe that having a community that you start with these members of the club, and there would be some form of a contract, covenant, code, and restriction, followed by the government rules that say things. But you could also have things that are only club members get to see these things, and you can engage in all the private contracts you want. Absolutely. If they say you can only break up 1,000-acre property into 25 parcels of 40 acres each, okay, it looks like we're going to have to find a way to sell 40-acre parcels. That's going to be a lot bigger of a price tag. So we got to find people that are willing to either buddy up, or people that already have a lot of money. And as a fraternal organization, we will have people that will witness contracts and say, yes, on plot A5, this 40 acres, we've subdivided it, and plot ZZ1 is going to Mr. Jenkins for this. And there are lots of details that can be worked out as to whether or not. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me comment on the subdividing, because I don't see that as necessary to do through legal channels. If you can get everybody together, social club, whatever you want to call it, on the 1,000 acres, then anyone involved can have their own contracts between themselves for dividing it, because you don't
Right.
need the law to respect that. You don't need the courts and whatnot once you've already entered into this with like-minded people, because I'm assuming you're not just, opening this up to investors anywhere. You would want people that that you respect, that you've, vetted.
Invited.
Yeah,
It would
and
be
invited
invited
through the
people.
social club to get in
Yeah.
here. So that seems like it might be completely unnecessary
Yeah.
if you're with a group of people who can respect each other and all this stuff. Just want to interrupt the show real quick to remind everybody that Beyond the Ballot is officially sponsored by Project Sparta. Now's the time to get healthy and in shape. Greg Papanikolaou is going to get you there with personalized meal plans, training, group support, and tons of amazing fitness and motivational resources and knowledge, including the Project Sparta Facebook group. You can go to projectspartacoaching.com and learn more about Greg's work and get started on your path to health. In this crazy world we're living in, our health is more important than ever. Get up, start learning, communicating, and training. One of the most important and often neglected things in life is your physical health. Get to projectspartacoaching.com now and get after it.
That would definitely be a concern. It would probably be just like how I conducted my marriage. I got married the way I felt like getting married. And then at a time later, we went and we did the thing that the government recognized it as a marriage because we wanted the benefits of the incorporation and the tax breaks and all the other shit. And if all of that wouldn't have been there, we would have never got the government seal of approval, but we still would have said we're absolutely married. And she took my last name. We're married. We had 80 friends there. And yeah, the guy up front said, "Pafoomf, you're married." And everybody was like, wow, they're married. Everybody accepted that. So we could totally have a society that, yeah, we don't need the presence of the state and their certificates to tell us, oh yeah, you have permission to draw a line over there. I'm just saying that by going through those channels, a lot of the time you can save yourself a headache that might come later. But again, the danger is, why attract the attention of the state if you really don't have to? Because if you start asking, oh, this 1,000 acres, I want to subdivide it into 400 parcels. And they're like, what are you planning on doing?
Right.
Now they're in your business.
They're in your business. And then
so that's another one of my concerns.
That brings in like zoning codes and building codes and all that stuff. Whereas I think if you keep it under,
absolutely,
if you keep it under a nonprofit of any type, you can pretty much put out what you want in there. Because one of the articles I was reading was talking about the relationship, and I think it was specifically the religious one, the relationship between religious properties that are property tax exempt and therefore also exempt from a whole other, smattering of laws and inspections and whatnot by the state.
Nice.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'd also concerned, which is really, really a long shot, because I'm trying to narrow it down to certain states in the United States where I'm at. I don't think the possibility of leaving the U.S. is financially possible. I'd say I'm fairly well off financially, but not so well off that I could move my family and myself and all that I would need to go through the process of getting to another country. I hope I don't ever have to become like a refugee. And a lot of Americans might end up finding themselves in that kind of situation in the near future. And I would like there to be places for libertarian refugees to go. Like, holy shit, I was holding out hope living here outside of Chicago that things would, eventually normalize, and it turned into a shit situation that now is too uncomfortable for me. Oh, there's a community like 500 miles away, and there are jobs for anybody willing to be a manual labor. That will be another thing that'll make it attractive. Is you want to attract the entrepreneurial types and the moneyed people to do a lot of the heavy lifting and a lot of the innovation, but you definitely need the people who don't have a whole lot of marketable skills. Like myself, I'm 45 and I really only know how to be a bartender, and I can deal casino table games and stuff. It's like a lot of people in this country, because of the artificial wealth that was created by the Fed, all these service jobs came into being. And if you look at how many people, over the last 10 years are in service industries, it's huge. Now, when an economy retracts and you find they're going, okay, instead of these 8 servers, we're going to 4. Well, what happens when you become redundant? Where the line cutoff was 180 and you're number 187.
Right.
So you're waiting for your call and waiting, and what are you supposed to do? Wouldn't it be nice if you were a libertarian-minded person, you're trying to play along with the state's game, but you keep becoming victimized to the circumstances of their centrally planned economy and all the rest of the whole madness of statism, and you're browsing around your Facebook or whatever, and you go, oh, there's a community out there of people who, instead of your neighbor being somebody who would gladly go to the poll and vote to decrease your liberty and increase your taxes and make you more of the fucking victim of the statist system and give themselves a greater share of your wealth, like that's what you're laced in with. Karens that'll call the cops because you're running your music too loud, too late at night. Oh, I smell somebody smoking the devil's lettuce. Time to call them in with guns. Like, I don't want to live around those assholes. It makes me very paranoid being a weed smoker, knowing that, well, the good thing is I live in a state where, like, yeah, I could blaze up right in front of the cops and they couldn't say a damn thing unless I was driving, of course. And then they could probably shoot me and my dog. But I digress.
This seems to be what most people that are joining these intentional communities that are already formed are running from. Are these, economic hardships and everything that's come from this whole COVID quote unquote crisis and the shutdowns and all that. They're more popular than ever from what I'm reading, but like we said at the beginning, they're more commune type. They're more community owned, extremely socialist. So that, and I guess I know there's a whole lot of people who aren't interested in going into that style of living. There was something else I wanted to talk about with this.
That's where I see the market.
Yeah. I like the amount of acreage that you're interested in getting, because talking with other people, they, like you mentioned, actually, you said 40 acres, and that's a number that a lot of people have talked about. And that's a number of acreage that I want to get for myself. I don't want to share 40 acres with 5 other families.
Right.
People think that 10 acres is big. I'm on 5 acres right now. It's not that big. I've worked in places that are 20 acres, et cetera. You go out there and see it. It's not that big. And if you want privacy, living with that many people in that small of an area is not great. So you could have communal buildings and whatnot for building your small society for the parts that everyone chooses to work together for the community aspect in a central area. But with 1,000 acres, you could build a house up on that ridge. I could go down to the next valley over, all that kind of stuff. And I think that would work out much better. Now, the thing about location, that's a hard part, because getting like-minded people who are into this stuff to choose an area, a central area, is really hard, because people are already into this and have found the areas that they think are the best, that they like, and are working towards going there.
Right.
It's like anything else with freedom-minded individuals. It's like herding cats. And you mentioned too, exploiting the loopholes and whatnot, and the places that you would want to go, looking at the laws and the places that are there. There's some things like building codes and zoning that I look at, but as far as political climate and a lot of other laws, there's really, I don't think, any reason to focus on that unless it's fucking something like New York or California with gun control. But most everything else is really not an issue if you choose to go out far enough and stay off the radar. I think the most important thing to look at when you're looking at a place to do this is your water, your plant diversity, your climate, and with water, average rainfall, all that kind of stuff. Natural disasters that hit the area, That is the most important part when you're picking all this stuff out, not to mention how much the land is going to cost in what area. Hey everybody, I want to give a quick shout out to Voluntary Apothecary. Voluntary Apothecary is here to fulfill all of your beard care needs. They carry beard oil, mustache wax, beard butter, and more. I only use their beard care products and I love them. You can check out their amazing products at voluntарyapothecary.com. And listeners of the show can take 10% off your order with code DANK at checkout.
Even when narrowing it down in the U.S., you have 50 states. Some of those states are bigger than most European countries.
Mm-hmm.
So it would really be much smarter, and it's a lot harder work to study counties.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the county model works better if you're going to say like, oh yeah, if I'm going to be under the boot of the state, would you rather be under the 10-pound boot or the 3-pound boot? Moving over to the 3-pound boot, and you go somewhere where things aren't as rough. Like the urban areas, no surprise, I think your rights are a lot more likely to be violated by public and private criminals. The system insulates them both. But once you get out into the country, you see people really taking care of themselves and their communities, and even sheriffs speaking out about like, if you guys think you're going to come into this community and riot, guess what? Everybody in this community is armed. That's a bad idea, dudes. Like that, if you had to have a fucking sheriff, wouldn't it be better for him to be like, you guys ain't going to worry about the sheriffs in this town. We don't even carry guns, but everybody in our town does. Mm-hmm. Like, I would be way more fucking scared of a town that's what the sheriff said if I was one of these rioter types. But getting back to the intentional community, that I really think that the large acreage appeals to me for a couple reasons. Of one, you end up getting a lot more acreage for someone who just wants to get there. Like, oh, if all I need is $2,500 and I can get like a half acre out there, that's all I need. I don't grow a bunch of stuff, so all I need is a half acre. And that guy, because he lives in a city, doesn't have the opportunity to make even living in a condo as profitable for him as if he could live in a voluntary society that isn't hyper regulated, hyper enforced, and that he's able to be the first guy in town who is an IT guy or something, or whatever it is that he's into. That's why I think at the very outset of it is the most exciting thing, is if we can get to the point of having a club, and then if we can get investors to the tune of $1 million, maybe $2 million to get a large parcel of property, and there will have to be a committee that decides where it is.
Sure.
And who's going to be on that committee and how big it's going to be, I don't know. But every business has to have a handful of guys running it. Like, you don't make a movie without a whole lot of people. But really, when you look at the credits, there's a reason why these certain names are always listed bigger and for a longer period of time, and they make you notice because it's right at the end of all the credits. Here's your writer, here's your director, here's your producers, those are your money men.
Right.
Those guys have a bigger say than the guy who puts up the lights.
Well,
if you're a capitalist and you're a voluntarist, you got to know that during some project, somebody is going to be the director.
Yeah. Let me ask this, though, as far as investing for different pieces of land on there, because one thing, if I were to get involved with something like this, which I am considering, because I think it'd be great to have the people that I like and have the same ideas as me around me, for a multitude of reasons, of course. But one thing I think is very important is that the entirety of, let's say, the 1,000 acres isn't divided out into personal living acreage. I think it would be good to have a number of people, whatever it is, have their parcels divided out, but then be surrounded by, and maybe even through and in between these individual properties, areas that are, I guess, communally owned, to keep them more natural and keep them Well, look at the wildfires in California. If this community was private, it would be
Right.
handled a lot better to prevent things like that, and you wouldn't have to have every inch
Of
of
course.
it sectioned out into personal properties as far as acreage for your homestead or whatever. Not to mention keeping areas wild and more natural to encourage whatever wildlife you want to hunt or is beneficial for the ecosystem to come in, or even certain plants and things to forage and harvest, like huckleberries, morels, ginseng, depending on where you're at. None of that's easily cultivatable. You need natural space for that. I think
Right.
that's an important thing. Is that something that you would
Right.
want to include with the idea that you're moving forward with?
For mine, it would probably exist, but not as a feature. Uh, for where I want to get to, it's probably it would feel a little bit more like uh, a business, almost a corporation type thing, but be able to do it to the best possible way. But in doing that, I would be able to franchise the idea to where maybe the second one, we realize that there's a market for people who want large areas to remain untouched. And that can be part of their contract that they signed on, so that all these towns don't just turn into McAnarchyvilles.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want just the same thing over and over and over, because there's not one solution. So maybe you go, well, the people who want to do this more natural approach, we can really only get about $800,000 together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we better start looking as a committee for $800,000 properties that are along the lines of what all these people listed as important to them, remaining that they don't leave a huge footprint on that biosphere or ecology, whatever. That there will be some, though, that'll be like, yeah, I'm putting in a lot of money and I'm laying down a bunch of concrete and, pumping in all the energy. We're tying up to the grid. Some places will be like, no, 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 no. Here, no one's allowed to tie up to the grid.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to appeal to a lot of those different kinds of groups, because we all fundamentally believe in the absence of the state, the freedom to do what you want, a freedom of association, non-aggression principle, and like the basics are there. But within that, it is a big tent. It's a very wide open area where there might be people that say, no, I don't feel comfortable living next door to a 6.5 foot tall tranny that comes out all the time wearing tattoos and stuff. And somebody else would be like, I would definitely love to live next door to that person. I don't even know what to call that person. Hey, how are you doing? That person has far more interesting stories to tell than the boring guy who's like, oh no, I want a totally controlled society. Like, you find out where that guy is inside of 10 minutes. I'd rather have a society that's like, yeah, we have a wide open amount of stuff. We are a liberal
Mm-hmm. Well,
community,
the
but that
whole
doesn't turn a lot of people on.
the
A lot
whole
of people who are libertarians still, for some reason, hold on to the traditional family.
Right. But the whole idea of intentional community seems to be moving away from an urban area. So I think people who would be interested in it would be
Right.
attracted to the idea, wouldn't be interested in, pouring that much concrete or building a town or city as much as more of an autonomous zone.
Uh, I'm not certain. I can only think and imagine the way that certain things might go is you could find a group of people who see this as merely a business opportunity. They are somewhat brutalist anarcho-capitalists.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's part of being okay with absolute anarchy is, yeah, there may be some people that, hey, at the end of the day, it's all about money for me. And okay, those guys exist. And maybe they get together and they have a 40-acre plot, and it becomes like the Hong Kong out of all of these
Sure.
little intentional communities. Like, wow, maybe these guys are kind of not the people I want to live next door to, but I am damn glad they have a community where they can engage in this, and I can engage in trade with them because I'm not so conservative that I'm like gonna pick and choose just my one or two or three things. Like I'm boycotting everything except for just the ones that are just like me. Like I don't think those people are really gonna gravitate towards this kind of project anyway, just because it, you're doing something that it isn't really like you're a pioneer, because the pioneer had done something way before us. This has been done. The westward expansion, like for time immemorial, man has always been on the move, setting up new settlements. And only now, like so many people get clustered together into these mega cities. Why did people stop going out and getting away from these cities and starting up a town that more faithfully represents them, even if it is just a handful of families? And we have the technology now so much better than they had during the 1800s. The land is way more hospitable. You're much closer to hospitals and food than you are before. Where are the natives that are going to come and be angry that you're moving on their land? You spend a few $1,000s and you GPS your fucking SUV and U-Haul there. It's not like you're going over the plains in a covered wagon.
Well,
this isn't Little House on the Prairie anymore.
This is what I see.
I just see so much weakness in the libertarian community.
Well, yes, but what I see as far as these intentional communities, I don't think that would necessarily be an issue of, let's say, the 40-acre compound of ANCAP Hong Kong, ANCAPistan, within this large thing, because wouldn't anybody, wouldn't the board, wouldn't it be more of a homogenous group, more ideas that are similar for one area, or is it going to be a board that's setting up somewhat like an HOA that allows anyone in that meets certain criteria, but not necessarily the criteria of what the land is for?
All right, let's see. That's kind of a lot to unpack, but let me see if I can hit all the points real quick. Starting with like the club social group, you get to use laws that are already established, like the social clubs now, like the Elks Lodge, Moose Lodge. They have different programs where if you've been in that group for long enough and you start donating to a little fund, when it's your time to go retire, they have already bought a large amount of acreage down, usually in Florida, for them to go and retire to. And nobody lives in that area except for their members. So I'm just going, well, why only offer that to people who retire? Why not have a place where a member who is a member of the Loyal Order of Liberty, as long as you've passed through a lot of vetting, and yeah, it's only just words on a paper, but when other people have witnessed it, your reputation really carries a hell of a lot when you're in a smaller community. You can't blend in and be insulated like you are in the statist community, and you do not want to end up being persona non grata in a very small community. So I think everything that has already been done just needs it's kind of a typical move for like someone from the US to do, is I'm going to appropriate a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I'm going to put all the best parts that I see together. And here's what it is franchising little dots of freedom. And if freedom to you means, all the different things that are important to you, but somebody else is like, I would never live next door to you. And I go, well, here, fill this out. And they fill it out. And I go, oh yeah, you wouldn't want to live near him. That community has all these things in it. What do you think of these different communities? And to make it not bound in one geographical location, to spread it out in a certain area, not too thin and not too close to populated areas, so that if anything should happen, like what was seen at the Bundy Ranch, I was very close after they had their initial conflict with their local police department or sheriffs or whatever. And I got out there pretty much around the time that it was like, oh, the feds are here, and here's this whole private army, basically. And apparently the word just went out, and whoever wanted to respond to the word did. And they backed them the fuck off. And they had a very fast response system. So by having multiple communities in different areas that all serve kind of the same purpose. Is we want to engage in trade for the benefit of ourselves and our communities. And I want you to do likewise. So it would behoove me to help if you're ever in trouble. So
Right.
maybe we just have a legal defense fund. You have 500 or 1,000 or however many people who, yeah, I put in $1 every month for the legal defense fund of any member of our group that should ever find themselves a victim of the state. We have to be able to protect against that. Like, that seems so much more appealing than this notion of like, oh, anarchism is no rules and nobody's going to help anybody but themselves. If you don't have these charitable organizations, and yeah, sorry, this is going to wrinkle some people, social safety nets.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have charitable groups, if you don't have known people in your community, if you live only a bunch of Ayn Rand type, yeah, I don't believe in charity. And if something bad happens to you, that's on you. If I were to help you, that's actually bad for you. And if you logic it out, that can make sense. But then you should be able to also logic out, well, what's that going to mean for you and everyone else around you after this event is over? You may be right, but you may have to sacrifice a little of something for your reputation, or just because you are a member of a community. There are certain expectations of, like, one of the things that I would demand under a contract of having an intentional community is no cops at all. Meaning you are not currently either an informant or an employee of the state, and you can have never been one, including military. And I know that for some people, like, I'm probably discounting a lot of amazing, great people who just happen to be voluntarists, but I do believe that the people who have been through that are either damaged, or there is something about them that I can't personally vibe with, because I like to drink. And when I do, I get a little lippy. And some of these people will freak the fuck out when you say the wrong thing.
Sure.
And I am definitely not the kind of guy to back down from a fight, even though I should. I'm 45. If I got in a fight with somebody, it could definitely kill me.
Well, we're getting in the weeds here.
I don't want to ever have to worry about that.
I get what you're saying. And so
I want to be surrounded by I just want to be around like-minded people, I think, is what I'm saying.
No, absolutely.
And that's what we all want. Everybody.
Yeah, that's what we all want. Where I got lost a little further back when I was talking about maybe the conflicting ideas of people who want off-grid versus people who want on-grid and things like that is I missed that. I think you were talking about this organization having a bunch of different areas as it grows for people to pick and choose, because I really liked the idea that you said you fill out the information docket, the questionnaire, to figure out where you want to go, and you match with the community that way. I was looking at this on the scale of the first one, like how you start, like the people that you would want around you. So that, I think that having that organization that makes these communities pop up all over the U.S., the world, wherever, is great. And I think it's really important to match people in that way, because people would be it would be the whole country living thing again, like we mentioned near the beginning of the show. You get to be a pariah pretty quickly. You get to be an annoyance to people pretty quickly if you're not living harmoniously, and that involves sharing the same ideals. Now, I don't think that it should wrinkle anybody, like you said, when you talk about these social safety nets and different community aspects, if it's voluntarily agreed upon before you enter into this engagement, before you enter into this community, because people can choose that. People can choose not to have that. You don't need the fact that it's voluntary is the point of that. That's what makes all the difference. If you all choose to help each other with things like that, great. I don't think you would need to have anything put together like a social security program, because you wouldn't be necessarily having that money that's stolen from you for Social Security, something like that, now taken from you, depending on how you organize the community. So I think, the legal defense, anything like that, is great. It seems like more of the communal aspects will be focused on defense from any entity seeking to disrupt how your community is operating from the outside. Whereas if you are in this community with like-minded people, you have the freedom to operate and the wealth to operate how you want to without having to have overboard social safety nets.
Right. I think that there'll be a lot more to offer for anybody who wants to be a part of this, whether it's just as an investor, as somebody who goes, I only have enough for an acre, but I speculate you people are going to do really well. So in the future, that acre is definitely going to be worth more to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping to make that happen as quickly as possible, get as many people there as quickly as possible. And projects like the Free State Project, I think they have noble ambitions, but I think they aimed really too high because there's too many people there. I think they may have guessed that there are a lot more people who are willing to relocate to a rough place like New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I haven't been there, but I've seen enough pictures and know enough about the winters to be that's not for me. But in the regard that I'll learn from that, I still apply that to this kind of business endeavor or fraternal organization, club, whatever you want to call it, that they will probably at some point in time want to find a large parcel in New Hampshire because there's a market there for it. I'm sure there are people who live in New Hampshire who love it, but they still hate the idea that they're more or less surrounded by statists. It would be much better if you had a large town. Like I live in a 35,000 person town. Some people can imagine 5,000 or even less, but I really think that starting with a town that may be a little bit off of where an already established town is, because in the very beginning, people are going to need to import and export into and out of this village. That will occur for a while, but I think with growth period of time, that'll become less and less necessary. That I see that whereas only a few people is why I crossed Alaska off my list was very few people are that tough. I'm definitely not Alaska tough. Even in the best areas, I don't want to deal with that. So I narrowed it down to, I think, 7 states where I would like it to be the first parcel. The first parcel ideally would be something over 1,000 acres, plenty of water, plenty of building rights that we could pretty much do what we want. And the states would be Nevada or Utah, Idaho, South Dakota, Texas, Arizona, and Colorado. And a lot of Colorado, from what I hear, over the last 4 years, just a real short period of time, has made it very difficult to build on your own land, to even camp on your own land. And you could probably fly under the radar for a while, but who wants that hanging over their head? So that's why I want to look for the best counties, and I think they're out there. And I'm narrowing it down, and I have it 5 states now, and those 5 states probably have 70 counties. Nevada only has like 8 or 16 or something, so it's real easy. I've live in Nevada, so I know pretty well which ones I wouldn't go to.
I like the idea of the counties much better than picking states, because there's no way you could pay me to move to Colorado for a whole lot of reasons. But you've seen me pushing it everywhere. I think people overlook Eastern Washington way too much, which is where I'm at, as people who listen know. Because Eastern Washington and Western Idaho are pretty much a state by themselves, by the way the counties work and by the way that the people are. And of course, you've seen the movements for people looking to separate into different states. But the county way is absolutely correct, because that's what my wife and I are dealing with now up here in looking for our land with what we want to do to it. Is you want to be outside of the counties that have the big city centers, and big is even a stretch for Eastern Washington, like Spokane. You don't want to be in Spokane County. It's terrible. But the surrounding counties are fucking awesome. Most of them don't even have anything on the books for building earth-sheltered home, anything like that. So you can pretty much go hog wild. And that's exactly the kind of stuff that you would want to be looking for. The county search is much better than the state search as far as that goes, unless you can lump in statewide regulations. It depends on how much the state government has infiltrated the county governments and so on and so forth, which it seems like a lot of areas of Colorado have, but I don't live there. I think another important thing is to visit these places to get the feel for a lot of this stuff. because like
Definitely.
I said, people generalize all of Washington that it's all like Seattle, and it's definitely not. Most of these places,
Right.
only the coastal regions are like that. That's really important to check them out if you can visit them. Yeah, and so as far as the approach, I don't
I
know.
think that's absolutely important.
Yeah, I don't know how on board I am
I
with
think
the
I think
business
definitely.
side of it. I would think I would like to see
Well,
more of a community come together to form it and
somebody's
then
somebody's.
run it as a business.
mm, I I think that could work too, but on the upside, I think that it would work better and be achievable faster for people who have the money, whether or not they happen to agree with it. They just see a possibility of making money on it, but yet they have little control over it. They're contracted to be investors with very little control other than you are obligating them to a 20% profit. So whatever business you figure out on the side to sell somebody on $5,000, $100,000, I know people that could probably throw up $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
And you're never more than a few people, a few connections away from somebody who has a lot of money and they do kind of agree with you, but they're happy living in the Bahamas or whatever, but they have a bunch of money and they believe in what you're doing and they want to be an entrepreneur in it. They want to invest in it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it has to be as 100% as the people who would actually be running the town, living in it. Uh, it it would be, in my opinion, the best of all worlds of making use of the things that are there. You're not trying to buck the system so much by starting some place with hard walls and 50 caliber
Sure.
turrets and going on news interviews and being like, this is anarchotopia and fucking anybody
You're
comes
just
and gets
asking
blown
for
up.
another
Like, it's
Waco.
not going to be long. This ain't going to go well. Yeah, it only lasts. It's what did Shane Radcliffe call it, like a permanent, a temporary autonomous zone. But
Mm-hmm.
what I'm kind of looking more for is a permanent autonomous zone. And I think Shane Radcliffe has something going in Southern Illinois, where the only other place other than Southern Nevada where I've lived, and it's just not for me.
Right.
Uh, I admire anybody who's willing to take up, like, I'm going to live on property with strangers and we agree these are the property lines, but there's nothing that says that they won't come over and be a nuisance or
Mm-hmm.
even a criminal. You have to trust people at some point in time, and I'm looking for as much freedom as I can get as soon as I can get. I'm 45 and I don't want to have something in a property that I put my life into, that I hand over to my children, that they still have to deal with the same entanglements of the state that I have to deal with. I'd rather them get the choice of, do you want to be a part of this community? You grew up in it, much like how the Amish have Rumspringa. When you
Right.
turn 16, they go, you can leave for a year. And if you want to come back, you come back. If not, bugger off.
Well,
And I see that you take the good elements from that and you leave the bad ones, like religion. Fuck that.
sure. Look now. Have you looked at all into if you had investors, if you were running it as a business, how that if that would mesh with a nonprofit to avoid things like massive property taxes for that much land?
We would probably have to work up something along the lines of private contracts where on paper they are members who are just happening to help crowdfund this amazing project for other members. But behind the scenes, we have a contract that says you're not allowed to reside here
Mm,
unless you sign contract 6, 7, and 9. Like these certain contracts that state about, you know, personal property rights and non-aggression principle, a lot of things that will get hammered out way beforehand
sure.
in committees of the people who would be members of this club.
It's funny you mentioned crowdfund because that's
Like I
something
said,
that I had been thinking about with this. That I think you could easily put together a nonprofit for, if especially with multiple families on a piece of land and people with different skills. And I'm talking more off grid because that's the draw to something like this. If you're going to crowdfund it, is you fund
yes.
it, and at certain levels, you have people that invest for I don't know, whatever amount to stay there for a month, a year if they want to learn from the people who are there, to learn different
Right.
skills, to get away and things like that. I think that would be much more easily workable as far as a nonprofit.
That definitely might be able to work, but that also might be a way that one group or many different individuals or groups fund buying their parcel. Is they say, hey, look, there's this
Exactly.
program that's going on and they're opening 1,000 acres in Idaho. And if you want to be a part of it, here's what the charter says. Here's the covenants, codes, and restrictions. And you read it and you're like, wow, this is really nothing like what I expected. It's not like an HOA, but it implements the best things. It's not like a commune, but it implements the best things. It's not like a corporation. So, like, just making the use of the best tools that are available in any given scenario is just wise to me. And since the playing field is varied and it's wide and there's a lot of places to just fly under the radar, you don't have to be, strutting the fact that everybody's armed in your community and you have, 12 private gun ranges or anything and like burning American flags. It's just like, that's not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is a parallel society, much like how the Amish are. You don't really know they exist until, oh, there's one of them, but we look like the rest of this society. We're not that far gone. But you back up a few hundred years and you'd be like, is that guy an Amish? Oh, yeah, look at his hat. Like, oh, look at the beard, whatever. And then society left them. They stayed where they were.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the people who think like me yearn for either something that never existed but was told existed, this fairy tale of you can do anything you want, uh, freedom, liberty, that you're not just going to be bossed around and extorted at every fucking turn, especially if you want to be an entrepreneur. We feel so fucking violated for just being lied to, that this would be something that I would think, definitely for me, like if I already knew something like this was going on, it would be as quick a process as possible to get there. And I think there's a market for those people. We have 330 million people in this country. Certainly I can't be the only one. God help us, please, that it isn't just a handful of like, oh yeah, there's about 100, 200 maybe. Like, but even out of the ones that are out there, let's say there's even 100,000. How many of them are so uncomfortable with the fact and so discouraged by, look at the shitty choices you have for president? Do you
Sure.
think it's ever any real difference? It like is it really going to change that much? No, the people who own the office don't run for office. Okay, they're puppets. They're like that. A lot of it is just smoke and mirrors. Some of it's real, but it's all bad. It's all bad for you, and you got to get out of it
Well, that's
somehow, some way. I found a nice little window by being laid off. I'm out of work, and this is a golden opportunity for me not to go, oh, but what about my lovely job that gives me almost six figures a year? Fuck that. It doesn't exist. This is a
that's
clutch time to really
exactly why
make a
we're bringing
move.
this up. Yeah, this is the time to start doing that stuff. That's why the show has been rebranded to Beyond the Ballot, because it really doesn't make a difference down the line to you at any point. And more people than anarchists and libertarians are starting to see that and starting to go their own way. So, is Voluntary Villages an open group that people can join? Do you know, on Facebook?
I'm not sure. I think you might have to be invited.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
if people
I
want
thought I
to.
sent you invite.
No, I'm in there. I just want to, if people listening want to check this stuff out, there are
Okay.
groups on Facebook for sure, and I'm sure other places where you can look for ideas of forming intentional communities and join up with people like Mr. Anarchist. If this kind of idea appeals to you, I think a lot of them are invite only. So start your own group and get people together to do this. Also, by the way, I'm winding the show down because we're at an hour, buddy. But that's something I wanted to say for that.
Gotcha.
I didn't know if there
Yeah.
were any groups or anything that you could recommend for people.
The Voluntary Village Creators Group. I'm a old Gen X guy. I'm 45, to where like I just stick to Facebook. I like lengthier conversations. I like to get to know the people. I have my list of people that I've spent years culminating as trustworthy people, and some of them will probably disappoint me, but that's life. It's a risk, and I'd rather risk being around people who at least claim this voluntarism and get away from the cities and get away from this system as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the whole world is under somebody's jurisdiction. So even if you think it's going to be better in Ecuador or any other number of places, yeah, it very well may be for you, but for some people, that's a bridge too far. I had a guy recommending the San Juan Islands off Washington. I'm like, aren't those expensive?
Yes.
And he's like, oh yeah, but they're the greatest place to live. Like, how could you possibly try to encourage other people to move there when it's like less than 1% of the people have that even as a possibility of getting just a plot of land with nothing on it? I want it to be places where you can come, you have a few $1,000s, the piece of land is yours, that it's something you can make use of for growing. Nobody's going to tell you what to do on it. It's your own business. We all believe mind your own business. So engage in trade with your neighbors. We would definitely be focusing on certain professions. You want electricians and plumbers and maybe a dentist or a physician, a nurse, things like that. You'd want the location to be somewhat close to a populated area, but not very, very populated in case things go really fucking bad. I wouldn't want to be right outside of like how I am. I'm outside of a place that has 2 million people. I'm an hour away. If things go really bad, a lot of those fuckers are going to come here and it's going to be awful. I'd rather live on 1,000 acres where we're not really part of a system dependent on economically central planned bullshit. So I think it provides a lot more opportunity for anybody who wants to engage in agorism, in any kind of anarcho-capitalism. Contracts will become the most important thing. So there will be having to be people who understand and can interpret contracts. There'll be having to be people who are adjudicators, but those people will also probably at the beginning would have to be working to provide food. A lot of the people would have to be, we're looking to provide food. If you're good at growing stuff, raising animals, that would be definitely an appeal to you because it'll get sold.
Yeah.
Because that's what this community wants, is they want to eat.
That's right. Well, okay, let's
so
call
those
her.
would be the people who I would see first moving there.
Oh yeah. Let's call our show. I think if people want to start this, I think the first step is to reaching out to like-minded people, finding people who have the same ideas as you for the community that you would want to start. And then I think after that is like you said, is getting together a team of people or hiring somebody to look at the legal aspects of it and looking at a nonprofit, whether it's a social club, an organization, religion, whatever you want it to be, and go from there. I think getting everybody on board with the same ideas is the main goal, though. But anyways, if you want to go beyond the ballot and do something like this, that's where you can start. Mr. Anarchist, thanks for coming on the show. Hopefully you can stick around for another couple minutes for after hours for the patrons.
Absolutely. Thanks for doing what you do, brother.
Awesome. Thank you, man. All right. We'll see you in the after hours if you're a patron. If you're not a patron, you want to support my work on Patreon, you'll unlock exclusive rewards like these after hours, and it's patreon.com/Beyond the Ballot. Thank you very much. Beyond the Ballot is sponsored by Project Sparta. Go to projectspartacoaching.com now to learn more and get on your path to health.